Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. Now, all summer we've had to deal with various casting rumors that largely turned out to be untrue. But the latest, that Benedict Cumberbatch will be a character in the new Star Wars film, Episode 7, that rumor just won't die. And that's because partially Benedict Cumberbatch is fanning the flames himself. Most recently, he's been promoting The Fifth Estate, and of course everyone's asking him, are you going to be in Star Wars? And Cumberbatch very cleverly is saying, look, no formal offers have been made, but no formal offers have been made to anyone. And then he went on to say that, at least the boss, which I guess is JJ Abrams, knows that I would really love to do it. So the question is Cumberbatch, being coy and he knows he's going to get an offer, or is he just campaigning hard for an offer? It could really be either scenario, but I have to say, I addressed this last week, this rumor that Benedict Cumberbatch would be a character in Star Wars Episode 7, and I'm still against it for a couple of reasons. The first one is that it's just going to make Star Wars Episode 7 seem like a Star Trek Into Darkness retread. I think there's no reason to revisit that. I think that, you dance with the one that brought you, and Star Trek Into Darkness is the franchise that brought Cumberbatch into Hollywood in a big way, and I would be much more excited to see him reprise the role of Khan and flesh that out further in another Star Trek movie. And also, the other problem I have is that I think that, you need to use unknowns. This is what I talked about when I addressed this rumor last week. I think that Star Wars works best when it brings in new actors. I'm going to answer an audience question, a viewer question at the end of this episode, which is about the casting process, and that will play into that a little bit there. But Cumberbatch, I love Benedict Cumberbatch. I am up there as one of his biggest fans, but I just think that he needs to do something else, stick with Star Trek, and I think Star Wars needs to be its own special thing, because it's Star Wars, for Pete's sake. And I think that JJ Abrams would just do everybody, and himself included, a disservice to just go and cast all his friends, because then it just becomes another JJ Abrams movie. It might as well be JJ Abrams Star Wars fan fiction. So that's the first news story of the day, and Cumberbatch fanning the flames to try and benefit your career. I guess I can't blame you, but I just really do think it's not the best idea for the material. Now, the second story of the day is we're at the film festivals are underway. Right now, Toronto is going on, and at Toronto, Tom Hardy's new picture Locke has been picked up by A24. Now, A24 has so far made quite a name for themselves with teen dramas. They did Spring Breakers this year, Bling Ring, and also Spectacular Now. Actually, 3 very good films. And, A24 is actually, one of you actually emailed me about this, and I've seen the story in the trades, that A24 is running a very clever Oscar ad campaign for Spring Breakers, saying, consider this shit, which is a hilarious take on the usual consider this, or for your consideration. I think that really, it would make me give a second chance to nominating Franco for Spring Breakers. I think it was a very good performance. He was by far and away the best thing in the movie. And when he showed up about halfway through, it really brought the film to life. And I really liked what it had to say. So hilarious. Love that Oscar campaign. Kudos to A24 for thinking of it. And I think it shows that they could launch a good campaign for Hardy and Locke. Now, Locke is definitely one of those Oscar contenders. It's very much an actor's piece. You can't get more of an actor's piece than this. Basically, it's Tom Hardy in a car in real time for the entire film, and it's about him sorting out a personal matter in a drive from one location to the other. He sports another crazy accent. I've put a link to the trailer or a clip from the film in the video description down below, and you can check that out. I think sometimes these real-time movies can be a hard sell, but I think Tom Hardy, certainly thanks to Christopher Nolan, has a very loyal fan base, and I think Tom Hardy is a very interesting actor, and I think if anyone can make an hour and a half in a car with one person interesting, it's largely Tom Hardy. So that's great that that's been picked up. Now it can get a release date and become yet another Oscar contender. That's the second story of the day. The third, I think, is really interesting, and that is premiering at a number of the film festivals, including Toronto, is a Japanese remake of Unforgiven. Unforgiven is the, of course, famous Academy Award-winning Clint Eastwood picture about a cowboy, a former villainous cowboy who's asked to be a hero, and it talks about the blurred lines between hero and villain. And they've remade it with Ken Watanabe in the role that Clint Eastwood played, and it's about samurais instead of cowboys. I've also put a link down below in the video description to that trailer. And I think I have to say I really think it's impressive the obvious respect that the director has for the source material. The director's name is Lee Sang-il, and he actually said that he saw Unforgiven when he was 10 years old, and it had such an impact on him that he really knew that he wanted to remake the film for his native land. And I think that usually we're always against remakes, but sometimes remakes can be a good idea. And I do like the idea. I think from what I can see from the trailer, they've changed it enough to almost make it like taking the universal story that Unforgiven is trying to address, this universal quandary of hero versus villain, and taken it and applied it to samurai culture. So I think that's interesting, and I guess I would say, well, why we should watch subtitled movies, and I think that audiences in Japan should watch subtitled movies. Clint Eastwood's film is quite good, but I do like this idea of a different take on it. I really do like filtering it through a different culture. So I would ask you, is there any movie that you think that you would like to see adapted for a different culture, and what do you think of this as foreign movie audiences become more and more more and more bang for their buck, and they go to the movies more. We've remade so many foreign films in our English language. What do you think of this idea of other film industries remaking English language films in their language? So those are the 3 news stories for the day. All three interesting things to think about. Star Wars, should it have unknowns? Locke, this new distributor, A24, trying to get things off the ground and maybe potentially doing multiple good Oscar campaigns or awards campaigns this year. I think they have a number of good contenders. Miles Teller in The Spectacular Now did a very nice job. And then also this remaking English language films for foreign markets. So the viewer question of the day is from Joseph Chad. And Joseph asks me, Grace, could you possibly shed some detail on the casting process? Such as how does the process differ from a newcomer and a legitimate movie star? I've always wondered how some directors will approach an actor saying, we want you, and then another time say, you need to audition. All right, so basically, actors are a draw for a film. If you know that an actor has reached a point where they become a plus for your movie, say like, of course, one of the most obvious choices is Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp no longer has to audition. Films have to jockey for his time. So often when you're attaching stars to your film, you always need at least one star, because that's how you get financing. Stars are often attached before a film is either greenlit by the studio and given financing, or independent investors are attached or approached. You need to have that star to say, look, X is going to be in this movie, and X gets usually a certain amount of dollars at the box office, and or can bring in media attention. Someone, an actor like Ryan Gosling, even though Ryan Gosling has a real spotty box office track record, and I don't think you could rely on him to bring in a hit. I think that if he's in a movie, it's going to get festival attention. Festivals will want it because they'll get media attention. So stars, that's why it's so important. And a lot of you will often say, well, Grace, why are you making such a big deal about a star's box office power? Because that's how a star can lobby for more work. It's something that it's a tool in their kit. Besides their talent, which is really just like the base, the foundation, an actor needs to be able to attract media attention, which is why it's so important that actors are willing to go out and do the publicity, which is a huge amount of work in and of itself, doing all the interviews. They will sit there for a junket and do literally 100 interviews in a day, just rapid fire in a row. And that's important to get the word out about the film. So that's why you would want a star, and that's why you would go to someone and say, you don't have to audition, I will pay you, we will negotiate a huge salary for you, and we'll bring you onto this movie. Or sometimes it's not a huge salary. What they do is they give the actor a chance to show a different side of themselves, or perhaps it's for like an awards bid. For instance, I doubt Matthew McConaughey was paid a lot for Dallas Buyers Club, but he would be eager to do it because it would get him a potential Oscar nomination finally and a lot of critical acclaim. And on the same side, the filmmakers would want Matthew McConaughey because to show him in such a transformation, we get a lot of media attention and potentially a box office hit, as we're seeing happen right now. Matthew McConaughey is bringing a lot of attention to Dallas Buyers Club that another actor might not have been able to do. Now, when it comes to the unknown, even there, I think most of the time, especially today, other factors are in play. Now, a long time ago, there's that famous story that Harrison Ford was cast as Han Solo because he was a carpenter working in George Lucas's office, and they asked him to read lines with other actors. But you have to remember, he'd already worked with George Lucas on American Graffiti, so he still had an in. He was kind of pals with the filmmakers. So that's why it's so important to kind of be out in Hollywood. And there's the famous Harrison Ford quote where they said, well, why did you make it, Harrison Ford? And none of the people you came out with to Hollywood made it as actors. And Harrison Ford said, I just didn't leave. And he, it was 11 years since he came to Los Angeles until he got Star Wars. So that was a huge time commitment and a huge gamble, which is why you'll only see a certain type of person go into acting, because you basically have to play chicken with your life. Things could potentially not work out, and you have to stay really in the game beyond, a reasonable doubt. You just have to have tremendous faith. Same for John Hamm. John Hamm worked for years. He was a teacher. I think, I forget her name, but the actress who was the second secretary after Pam on The Office, she was one of John Hamm's students. So it's just funny to see how people have to stay alive until they get their big break. So that's sometimes how an unknown is done. And they might be an unknown to you as an audience, but they're known within the industry. They've been making the rounds, they have an agent, and they go to casting, and they're kind of in the pull file. So that's one way. So that's like a professional unknown, I guess you could say. So that's sometimes how they get roles. And by the way, John Hamm only got Mad Men because Thomas Jane, the first choice for the show, passed on it, and because he was considered a bigger name. So they had to go with an unknown, basically. All right, so a true unknown, someone who just comes out of nowhere. That is usually, sometimes you'll see it's the child of somebody who already works in the business. Sometimes an actor like a singer like Lily Collins. Her father is Phil Collins, obviously, but often it will be someone who works behind the camera. For instance, the Zoe Deschanel and Emily Deschanel, their father is a famous cinematographer. So that's how they got into the business. They had connections already. I believe Keira Knightley's parents are also involved. Is writer. I think her mother's a writer and stuff like that. So even Daniel Day-Lewis comes from an industry family. So it's really fascinating. You go online and you can say like acting families, and you can kind of see how it works. And for instance, Drew Barrymore, famous family where all the Barrymores. She comes from a long line of actors. So that's another way. And then there's another factor where you can get some heat by being in a really great independent short or on the stage in New York, and you start to get some good reviews and suddenly become kind of like a hot commodity, and then Hollywood wants you because they can point to your reviews. The whole game is, what can we point to? Hollywood doesn't like to take a risk, so they need someone else to vouch for you. Whether it's a large body of work that you've been working on, your agents are backing you. Sometimes that actor will get in as part of a package deal from their agency, or they need some critics to vouch for you, or they need to have one hit. That's kind of the game. So that's how casting works. So even if they get unknowns for Star Wars, they might have casting calls. I doubt they'll go to that level for a film like this, especially since it's starting to shoot pretty soon. But the people they pick will be people who have been making the rounds in Hollywood. But the trick is not to get in one who's been making too many rounds. You don't want that person who really belongs more in a television show because they've been on every television pilot known to man. You really want that. I think Star Wars really should go for that theater actor, or that independent film person who, is kind of like on the fringe of being discovered. Or someone like John Hamm who's been floating around, and maybe you might be able to find a show here and there where you're like, oh, look, it's that actor in the early days before they got anywhere. But basically, is still holding on, but just hasn't quite made it. So that's casting. It's all political, just like everything in Hollywood. So what do you think of that? Do you think that Hollywood's making a mistake? I often feel that they should be a little bit more open and go back to the open casting call. Oh, and also, I have to also add, open casting calls do happen at the child actor stage, and that's how a ton of actors get started. Even actors you've never heard of have often been working in the industry with little success, but just enough to keep them in the game since they were children. And then by the time such as for instance Scarlett Johansson, is an actress like that, who has been working since she was a small child. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, he had some success because of Third Rock from the Sun. But, people who start out very young, 3 or 4 or 5, and they're showbiz kids, and they make the connections they need to at a slightly less competitive time, and then they get into the field and they can get an agent, and they get passed on to other agents, and they get over that first hurdle. So that's how it works. Those are today's news stories and viewer question answered. Write your own thoughts down below, and if you have any stories you'd like to see covered tomorrow and any questions you might like to see answered. Thanks for watching. Bye.